Welcome into the All Things Mizzou podcast, and welcome to SEC Play, where it just means more. I'm Joey Van Zummeren, one of your football reporters from Missouri on SI, and I'm joined, as always, by Michael Stamps. How are we doing ahead of Week 4, Michael?
Yeah, Greg Sankey really burned in the "just means more" this last week, didn't he? I heard that more times
Mhm.
than we probably would have wanted to at that board of curators meeting. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's SEC time, and now these games, not even going with the slogan. These games do actually mean more. This is
Yeah.
where not even just Missouri, everyone needs to show up, and it is a bit of a clean slate for some teams who maybe haven't performed how they would have liked. Maybe you look at a team like Vanderbilt, who's coming off a pretty ugly loss, which will obviously go over uh, down the road here. But they now have the chance to prove themselves, and they have a pretty new roster and things like that. But I mean, yeah, I think this is going to be the more exciting games. You're not going to see crazy blowouts. You're going to see more close, tightly knit, maybe not super clean games, but tough battled out games, things like that. I think this is kind of the point of the season, not even in the SEC, but all throughout college football, where things just get generally more exciting because these tend to be, the most competitive games that you're going to see in the season outside of a few out of conference games and obviously the postseason. So it's exciting. I think I've said this every week, maybe not every week, but we're hoping for an entertaining one. We surely got some entertainment against Boston College, so it'll be interesting to see how Missouri fares against Vanderbilt this week.
We've harped on a lot of that Boston College game, and at this point, it's Wednesday. This episode's going to upload probably on Thursday. We're moving on from that Boston College game pretty quickly, but there was one thing that Eli Drinkwitz mentioned in his press conference on Tuesday that I thought was so relevant going forward in this season of putting your feelings in a box. That was his message to the team on Monday, just after looking back at the Boston College game and some of the discipline issues there. I don't think he's referring just to Luther Burden's two penalties on that drive that set up a second and 59. I don't think he's referring to just that and Joseph Charleston's penalty that he got on a kickoff. I believe it was unsportsmanlike, but nobody on the broadcast really saw exactly what that was. We didn't see it up there. So still not sure exactly how that went down. But I think he's referring to, in general, this team. And it's not like we've, at least from the outside, been able to see some lack of discipline. But he mentioned kind of vaguely after the Boston College game that there was guys that didn't play up to their standard in this one, and so he really wants to drive in that discipline again. Like I said, putting your feelings in a box, putting your big boy pants on, and we'll see how Mizzou moves forward with that. I'm sure, as far as like the actual emotional discipline, we'll be able to see some of that on the field if they are able to cut out these. We'll see. It'll be fun to see. I think Luther Burden maybe grow in those areas. If we see him kind of get tempted like that to engage in the same way, if he learns, like he said he would, to not engage, not respond back. As far as living up to the standard, playing up to the standard, we'll see what Eli Drinkwitz has to say, and really the results will speak for itself. But I would think his main message of not letting your emotions get the best of you would mainly apply to those two penalties on Burden. And I thought it was good that Drinkwitz said that he still thinks Luther deserved every bit of that passionate yelling he received from Coach Drinkwitz on the sideline against Boston College. So that's that. That's his message going into this week. And again, we're not going to spend too much time on this Boston College game. Main thing we learned was that Mizzou can respond to adversity. But now, like Michael said, this is where we're really going to learn what this Mizzou team is all about, the character of it. And after facing their first adversity of the season, maybe we'll get to see a greater look at this team. That was kind of the case last year. They go and have a tough game against Middle Tennessee State, which should not be happening as a SEC team, and especially where Missouri ended up last year. And then also that bled into the Kansas State game, I think. And then to have that adversity in the Kansas State game, that's when we really started to find out what this Missouri team was made of last year. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same case this year, although I don't expect them to face too much adversity against Vanderbilt. But Michael, any final thoughts from this game against Boston College?
I really liked after the game and the press conference. I really enjoyed, not enjoyed, but it was nice to hear that accountability from Burden for himself. He knows those mistakes. Those not losing his level head. He knows those aren't okay. And I don't remember the exact quote drink had, but something to the effect of that. Though your personal feelings or whatever are not bigger than the team's mission. I think that's kind of the main takeaway from that. I think last year, early in the season, if I recall, Johnny Walker losing a level head with a not so good unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. You just have to know the situation, maybe know the officiating a little bit. If it's been loosely officiated or been tightly officiated, know what you can get away with and what you can't. Obviously, football is a physical game, an extremely emotional game. So there is a balance of excitement and being emotional and letting that excitement show and hurting your team and getting in someone's face or anything like that. So I think there has to be a fine line of the energy and the excitement and the emotion that you build up after doing something good or bad, and then crossing that line, which you could argue Burden did or didn't do. We'll leave that up in the air. But there's definitely a fine line of not letting those emotions boil over. But hopefully that was a bit of a lesson that's not so that can happen.
Absolutely. Moving on from that Boston College game. Well, I guess not moving on, because one performance I did want to talk about that game was one that we talked about after the game in our post-game show as well. But Blake Craig has had some honors rolling in. He was put on, he was SEC Special Teams Player of the Week. Luke Graza watch list as well. So congratulations to him. We got to talk to him yesterday as well. Seems like a fun dude. He has all the confidence in the world, Drinkwood said, and his teammates have confidence in him as well. And the fact that I thought it was kind of a under talked about point during this offseason that Mizzou was moving on from Harrison Mevis, not by choice, but having to live without Harrison Mevis and sometimes replacing a I guess franchise kicker wouldn't be the right term since there's a limited amount of time. There's an expiration date for any college player, but having to move on from a kicker who is really steady for you for quite a few years and onto a redshirt freshman. And the fact that Blake Craig, I mean, when he went out there against Murray State, that was the first time he was kicking in a football game since his senior year of high school in 2023, so fall of 2022. So, I mean, that's crazy to think about, just the game situations, mental awareness part of it. But hearing from him, hearing from Drinkwood, sounds like he has all the confidence in the world. And I mean, he absolutely showed out in that game. And like Drinkwood said afterwards, was the difference in that one. He goes 4 for 4 and they win that game by 6. So obviously, identifiable difference maker in that game. Michael, any thoughts on Mr. Craig?
I hope we get to hear from Blake Craig more in the future. I really enjoyed listening to him from a journalistic standpoint and just a human being standpoint. Seems like an amazing guy. But yeah, it's very clear that even if he is, a little more quiet and a little shy, he does have all the confidence in the world, and no doubt that he's going to step up and drill a big kick. Coach Drinkwitz has had plenty of questions over the last couple of weeks from the media asking, especially after Buffalo, where he missed 2 or 3. Asking if they had confidence. All the confidence. It was 2 field goals against Buffalo. If they still had confidence in him, and Drinkwitz never batted an eye. So it sounds like Craig has really been their guy. I'm not going to say from the beginning, but because I'm sure there was hiccups in the spring and fall that we don't know about. I think they mentioned that one time he got benched for Nick Quadrini. So, I mean, I'm not saying he was perfect, but they have all the confidence in the world. And not now, now he has something to show for it. So he is a reliable fallback option where, if they're struggling to score, they know they can count on him for 3 points. And
now the question at kicker is answered. We still have a few more questions to get to for this Mizzou team on before they head out into SEC play until they enter the world of the SEC. And so, over these first 3 weeks, that's the question we've been asking after each game is, what did we really learn about this team? And there's been a few things learned. I think, for one, there's some things that are hard to tell, is this just them not opening up the full playbook, not the team not being experienced, not having enough reps with the entire playbook to run the whole playbook, stuff like that? Or is this truly a new thing, a part of the 2024 Missouri Tigers? And so we each have two questions we wanted to talk about. I want to go first and say, what role does the explosive pass play in this Mizzou offense in 2024? And it seems like it's pretty different than the role played in 2023. It was the main thing in 2023. Not that they were throwing home runs on every single pass, but it was the straw that stirred the drink in 2023. Really kept the defense on its toes. Marquise Johnson was a big part of that. He only had 13 receptions last year, but when he had big games, they were big performances. I think back that Memphis game in week 4, so right around this time last year, was when he really got onto the scene. Haven't seen him much involved. I know Brady has gone for him a few times, and it's difficult to tell, too, how much of this is Brady Cook's lack of connection with receivers, and that's not blaming it on either one of them, but just it seems to be a factor in it. At least in the first 2 weeks, Brady had a few overthrows on wide receivers. Now, as we talked about before, Drinkwitz said that Brady was making the right reads on those at least, but it has been interesting to watch this team not be able to have success on those, especially when you have guys like Theo Weiss, a 50-50 guy, Marquise Johnson, really speedy guy, that they haven't been able to connect on many of those at all. So that will be interesting to watch. We heard from Brady Cook yesterday. He said that offensive coordinator Kirby Moore is going to try to get them more deep ball opportunities on first and second down because they have the playmakers to do it. And we'll have to see. I mean, it could be also that defenses have now had an entire year of film, being able to watch them, are game planning for them differently. We heard from Drinkwitz after both Buffalo and Boston College that they were playing off coverage. And so that's obviously going to change things. It's just smarter to take the smarter or the shorter throws. So definitely going to be interesting to watch. It seems like I said, though, from talking to Brady Cook yesterday, they're not completely giving up on it. And it's not really a change of identity or plans just yet. But we'll see when they're able to get that clicking. Michael, what's the question you still have about this Mizzou team?
Mine is going to shift over to the defensive side of the ball. My question is, how good is this Missouri secondary? Obviously, the first two opponents that the Tigers took on were not, not the best teams they're going to play all year, and the defense looked really, really comfortable and didn't flinch at all. Marvin Burks had a pick against Buffalo. Pride obviously won against Murray State, and all seemed to be well until a busted play and Thomas Castellanos connects with Reed Harris for 67 yards. So that was something that kind of even shocked me. I didn't really see that coming at all. And again, quote me if I'm wrong, Joey. I believe that was Toriano Pride, supposed to be Toriano Pride in coverage. I could be wrong there, but regardless, there were two. Obviously, Thomas Castellanos had 2 touchdowns that were completely wide open, busted coverages, which is not something that we've really seen yet. Coach Drinkwitz alluded to it yesterday that Castellanos kind of picked him apart when they played zone coverage, and really they were, receivers were able to find their spots and sit down in that zone coverage and get open and get some nice chunk yards, things like that. The defensive line has looked really, really, really solid through these first 3 games, and they did a really good job of containing Castellanos. That's the truth. He only ran for what? He ran for 16 yards on 13 carries, and obviously he had some runs that were longer than others, and tackles for loss kind of negate those things. But he wasn't really ever able to escape and bust off big runs like he has previously, which I found to be super impressive. But again, I think that zone coverage that the Tigers put out was slightly concerning. And obviously we know they're capable of doing it, and they have big kind of ball hawk playmakers, guy like Pride, who's super athletic and can jump passing lanes and things like that. But I think Boston College showed a little bit that if you can kind of sit down in their zone coverage, that you might be able to break them apart a little bit. So not necessarily a massive question, but that being said, Missouri is going to take on better passing quarterbacks. Nothing against Thomas Castellanos, because he really had a good game, but they're going to take on better passing quarterbacks than Thomas Castellanos. So it's something to keep an eye on looking forward, that they're going to have to improve on. They got a good test against Boston College, with that, and we're going to talk about Diego Pavia here momentarily, and he's similar, and which he can get out of the pocket, and also has a pretty decent arm on him. So I think other teams are going to be able to look at this Boston College tape and say, this is how we can pick apart this Missouri defense, and then the Missouri secondary is going to have some things that they need to tighten up.
Absolutely. Another question I have about this team, and I'm almost annoyed of talking about it at this point, because it's been such a storyline to talk about, and I think they're going to be just fine at this position. And I'm sure Eli Drinkwitz, as you says, annoyed, if not more annoyed, about this talking point. But what the running back dispersion is going to look like, there's no point for me to exhaust talking about the differences between Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll for the 80th time. But it's been different from game to game, honestly. I think it's pretty established, though, that Nate Noel is the main guy there. And then Marcus Carroll, when it's needed. Looks like Jamal Roberts might get involved too. Then that was kind of something we knew before the season started as well, just from the opportunities he had in fall camp, especially on third downs, especially as a receiver. Definitely would think he's a better receiver than Marcus Carroll. And so we'll see what the involvement of that looks like. But Nate Noel definitely had the hot hand this week, and we'll see if that continues. Michael, what's another question you have about this team?
I mean, yeah, I think my final talking point is another thing we've really beat over the head the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure Coach Drinkwitz is tired of hearing about it and seeing it on the football field, and that's the penalty situation. I mean, my main question being, is this just an early season thing? They're still getting acclimated. The offensive line is still finding its footing. Is it that sort of thing, or are there genuine issues? On the offense and defense? And the defense committed majority. I don't remember the number, but committed majority of the penalties last week. I don't know if there were any on offense besides the unsportsmanlike conduct, and I guess there was a block in the back and an ineligible man downfield, so that's wrong. Point being, those are things that do cost a team, and against Murray State and Buffalo, we saw a lot of stuff on the offensive line, false starts, things like that, and then the defense as well. So I don't know if it's just it's early in the year. We're still getting our feet under us, and that's not unusual for throughout college football in general. Usually those first couple games you are a little bit sloppy, and even when two good out of conference teams play each other, those games early in the season usually aren't as clean as if the same two teams were to meet in the college football playoff and play. Those are going to be those teams playing at their best, usually obviously early in the year, little sloppier. So is it that, or is it a genuine flaw in discipline and, with false starts and holding and things like that? So something to keep an eye on. I think if there's another unsportsmanlike conduct penalty this week, Coach Drinkwitz might just lose his mind, which I don't know if I want to see that or not. And he said multiple times that those discipline penalties, those false starts, offsides, and things like that, he takes responsibility for those, which I respect from a head coaching perspective. But those are things that obviously have to change, because like we alluded to earlier, talking about Burden and his penalties, like those do cost a team. And if you can get away with it against Boston College, who's a very good team, which is impressive. It speaks to how Missouri played. But if you're going to commit that many penalties, are you going to be able to get away with it against an Oklahoma, against an Alabama, um, and other teams in the SEC? So it's again something to keep an eye on. You don't want to become a trend, because in the long run those are going to hurt you, and you're not always going to be able to rely on the talent to overtake the discipline. So
let's turn the page to this Vanderbilt team here, coming in 2-1, had a surprising upset over Virginia Tech and to open up the season. Now coming off an upset loss on the flip side of upset to Georgia State, the former school of Marcus Carroll, the running back. Offensively, you alluded to a little bit, Michael. Diego Pavia, the quarterback transfer. Pavia, a mobile quarterback again, but different than CJ Agbana in Buffalo, different than Thomas Castellanos in Boston College. Pavia, more of a physical runner. Drinkwitz compared him to a fullback playing that quarterback last night on the Tiger Talk radio show. And so it'll be interesting to see, again, kind of how he changes Mizzou's defensive game plan here. I think as opposed to weeks against Agbana and Castellanos, where you really wanted your faster linebackers to be able to pose a threat to the quarterback, be able to spy on him, I think might see, as opposed to Khalil Jacobs, Corey Flagg, the faster guys, maybe Chuck Hicks is placed on a few more of those quarterback spies. Maybe he's tasked with the responsibility. Just they need a sound tackler there. Obviously, Pavia is still fast, not as fast as Castellanos, so it's not as shifty. So it'll be interesting to see Mizzou's game plan. And really, I feel like that's got to have to be a main part for this Vanderbilt offense. It was a big part of it, and they're upset over Virginia Tech. Michael, what are your thoughts on this quarterback for Vanderbilt?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Missouri defense does. I would expect much more pressure off the edge this week. Obviously you can't really let Castellanos get out of the pocket, otherwise he's going to run you around in circles, which he didn't get the opportunity to do. You can probably afford to let Pavia get to the outside and rely on somebody being able to tackle him. I mean, he's yet to throw an interception, so that was the same thing with Castellanos going into the week. Obviously, he ended up throwing 2, so it'll be interesting to see if they can force any takeaways out of him. He didn't really, blow my mind when I was going back and watch him against Georgia State as far as when he was throwing the ball. It was a decent stat line, right? 270 and 2 touchdowns, but just a little bit over 50% completion percentage, which is, again, an advertisable stat. At the end of the game, their last drive after Georgia State scores with under a minute left. You're throwing the ball on all four possessions, and I'm pretty sure they went 4 and out. I could be wrong. So kind of a advertised stat there, but he has a good arm. It's not anything that's gonna blow you away or anything like that. But the focus again for really the 4th week in a row is going to be stopping him on the ground. I can't remember who, someone asked Christian Williams yesterday, like, this is a quarterback who really likes to absorb contact and take hits and try to run you over. And I think that's a challenge that the Missouri defense is really willing to accept. If you tell a guy that they have to go hit somebody, I would be shocked if they were not excited to go do so. And I think Christian Williams said something similar. So I don't think that's going to be a challenge, but yeah, he's going to absorb contact, and he's going to want to hit you as much as you want to hit him. So definitely a different style of runner than what we've seen with Castellanos. He actually did remind, we didn't get to see Agbana run all that much, but he does remind me a little bit stylistically of how they run the ball, a little more powerful, not as shifty, but not guys you want to let out of the pocket by any means. So going to be a different game plan. Like I said, I'd really like to see Missouri bring more pressure off the edge instead of trying to just contain them like they did with Castellanos. Different styles. I think bringing more pressure with guys like Johnny Walker and Zion Young and Joe Moore and Eddie Kelly is going to be really, really important. Because he's not necessarily, Pavia is not necessarily a guy you want to let sit and have time to throw. And the Vanderbilt, Georgia State was able to generate a little bit of pressure. They sacked him twice. So, and I couldn't find a stat on hurries or anything like that, but they were able to generate a little bit of pressure and get to Pavia. So, and that was one of the keys that really helped him win. So, I think that's going to be another really important thing is trying to generate some pressure on him because they really, Drinkwitz said this, and so did other people last week. Like, Castellanos is not a guy you're going to sack a lot, and that's okay because you don't want him running around in circles. So,
right, it's going to be interesting to see how they, again, I mean, just overall game plan for Pavia, but also just their pressure decisions because as Drinkwitz talked about a lot last week, and you were alluded to here, Michael, of you don't want to send too much pressure after Castellanos. If you lose a guy back in the backfield from over pursuit, then you're losing the guy to bring him down once he scrambles out of there. I think it's a little bit different with Pavia. So we'll have to see. Like I said, maybe they'll be a little bit more aggressive with their pressure. Also, with that, I mean, this Vanderbilt offense, my impressions of them from watching a little bit of their game against Virginia Tech was just the marrying of the running and pass game, just being able to disguise those looks really well. So where you can't tell, no matter what formation personnel they're in, you really can't tell. No dead giveaways for if it's going to be a pass or run. They use their two tight ends very well. A lot of 12 personnel. They have three that they rotate through quite often. Sowers is the main receiving one, really thin guy. I mean, he's, I believe it was Booger McFarland who said there was a Carolina tight end, and I forget who it is. Michael, you're a Panthers fan. Who is this dude that Booger McFarland was like? He's a Popeye's biscuit away from being a offensive lineman.
Could not tell you.
Dang. No idea. Okay. That you had one job, but Eli Sowers is the exact opposite of that. He's like a, off day of eating from being a wide receiver. And so he's a great receiving threat. And Drinkwitz mentioned that, they use a lot of their tight ends, but when number 9 is out there, they know the ball is going to him. They're going to try to throw to him, not as much as a blocker. And so I think that is a little bit of a giveaway. They use their tight ends slightly as a H-back a little bit, where they have them instead of in between the tackle and the guard, though, they have them on the edge, though, to block any overhang blockers. So that'll be interesting to see, again, affecting Missouri's pass rush decisions. Entering Vanderbilt offense that hasn't been able to get much going outside of Pavia's rally in that upset win in week 1. Michael, any thoughts? Any other thoughts besides Pavia's game?
I mean, yeah. One thing worth noting is Stowers was on the weekly injury report listed as questionable. I read on Tuesday that he practiced, but not at 100%. So something to keep an eye on. I'd be surprised if we didn't see him out there on Saturday afternoon, but I guess that'll be something to monitor. I mean, Quincy Skinner appears to be their leading receiver. He had a pretty good game against Virginia Tech, 4 receptions, 72 yards and a touchdown. So obviously a lot of that's 4 pretty big chunk plays, which is something that I'm sure the Missouri defense very much wants to eliminate. That was an issue last year against Vanderbilt. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Cedric Alexander is the second leading rusher behind Pavia. He has 3, I believe, touchdowns on the year. Just not a super big standout. One more thing on Pavia. I mean, I think the truest of his ability was put on display against Virginia Tech. 190 passing yards on 16 attempts and 12 completions. So that is an efficient football game. And then 104 rushing yards with the touchdown as well. So that is what you cannot let happen. If he gets a good balance of both, I think that's really what's going to hurt the Missouri defense, because you can look at the stat sheet, it says he has 90 passing yards, then you look and he has 100 rushing yards, and that's going to hurt a team. So, but you made a good point though, Joey. Outside of Pavia, it's kind of hard to predict, I think, who is going to step up and be a big playmaker. They have guys who are capable of it. The three being Alexander at running back, Skinner at receiver, and Stowers at tight end. But it's kind of hard to predict, I think, who's going to do what on a given day. I mean, we can throw some more names out there. A guy like Junior Sherrill. I mean, there seems to be their receiver too. Kind of hard to pinpoint what he's going to do. AJ Newberry's our backup running back. He has 77 yards, but that's only 10 carries. So not a great tell. So there's not really a great feel for how good some of these guys are, in my opinion, outside of Skinner, Alexander, and then Stowers. Stowers is going to be probably the main guy that they're going to aim to shut down, though.
Switching things over to the Vanderbilt defense and the Mizzou offense in this one. Clark Lee taking over. Drinkwitz said that this defense has looked pretty different with Clark Lee taking it over, and obviously that was Clark Lee's rise to fame with Notre Dame back in the day, working with Mike Elko on that really good defense there. And a lot of different looks. One part of that is the rover position, basically just a guy that, as far as how they used the rover position at Notre Dame, they had Drew Tranquil and then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah playing that position at Notre Dame back in the day. Both those guys excelled there. Just a guy that kind of roams the middle of the field, can play closer to the line, can be really a do-it-all guy in the plays and run support, plays back and pass coverage as well. And obviously, JOK and Drew Tranquil, two guys that can do both those. And like I said, did really well at that position at Notre Dame. They obviously have Langston Patterson on defense. I wanted to say Langston Hughes there at first, but Langston Patterson I don't think is quite as prolific as a writer. So with this Vanderbilt defense, I asked Clark Lee about this on the SEC teleconference today, and I thought it was interesting to talk the way this Mizzou offense operates. Its identity is built around the stretch down run game, and even if they don't, have a ton of carries in a game, that's how they really establish their game plan, and that's where everything else opens up through. Obviously, that opens up the play action pass, keeps the defense honest after a few runs. And we saw it, against really in all three of these games where they start out run heavy on that first drive, and then they start opening up a bit more with passing game. And obviously with that, they can attack you on so many different levels. Michael, your thoughts on a brand new look Vanderbilt defense?
Yeah, I'm going to highlight their two safeties. It's CJ Taylor and fun little name, DeRicky Wright. Coach Drinkwitz mentioned them both. They're just really solid veteran safeties, good tacklers, get the job done in coverage as well. CJ Taylor is going to be out for the first half against Missouri on Saturday afternoon because of a very silly targeting against the Georgia State Panthers that I'm sure he regrets because, obviously you don't want to lose to Georgia State, but Missouri, hopefully harder game than taking on Georgia State. I guess not if they, they gave them a run for their money, obviously, but I'm sure that's going to be something that leaves him frustrated. They've been around for quite some time. This is Taylor's fourth year with the Commodores, and then DeRicky Wright, this is his fifth year, so they have some time around the block. Another name I wanted to mention was Randon. Oh, I really don't want to butcher this one. Randon Fontanet, I believe. He's a very dynamic linebacker. Played a little bit. I actually remember following his recruitment because he was pretty highly touted in the SEC circle of recruiting. He's a guy from Texas, so he played a little bit of hybrid safety linebacker in high school, and could probably do so. I think he does do a little bit of both and dropping back and things like that. So I honestly think he's probably the most talented player on this Vanderbilt defense. He's their second leading tackler, and he's only a sophomore as well. So that's going to be a guy to keep an eye on. Just looking down the list, if I remember correctly, Zaylen Wood, who's a defensive lineman, appears to be. Let me look at my injury report. He's out.
He's questionable.
He played.
He's
questionable. Okay.
Now, yes.
Yes. Yes. And he Yeah, he is out. He
Okay.
played against Virginia Tech and was 7 tackles and a sack. So that's obviously a high impact player in a high impact game. Um, and he's been out since. So that would be a guy that they're going to be missing a little bit. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty well distributed statistically. So not anyone particularly stands out. Brian Longwell at linebacker, Glenn Seabrooks at defensive on the defensive line as well. There's going to be guys that can make plays, and um, they've generated a decent amount of just decent amount of pressure. They have pushing 5 to 6 sacks, which is a pretty respectable number, I guess. Around 2 per game. I guess that could be higher, especially if you're playing teams like Georgia State. But so maybe that's going to be something they struggle with, is generating pressure. They have guys who certainly are capable of doing so. So yeah, I mean, I don't I don't want to be hypercritical, but nothing about Vanderbilt really stands out too much about me. This should be a game that is not as challenging as Boston College last week was, for sure. Even if it is SEC play, I think this is a good again. It's always going to be a good test, and you can't take any game in the SEC lightly, whether it's a Vanderbilt or whether you're playing Georgia. Um, but I think this should be one where Missouri is able to take care of business. That being said, notoriously, the last 4 or 5 years, and I think Coach Drinkwitz is very aware of this. Vanderbilt's been able to put up some good tests, even with good football teams, with good Missouri football teams. So they're gonna have to go and take care of business for sure. But I think it being at home is definitely a massive benefit. They're gonna have a hopefully electric Furrow Field at 315 behind them. So I would be more concerned if I'm Missouri preparation wise. How do I stop this offense compared to how do we get around this defense?
And a lot of what you mentioned there is exactly why Mizzou was 16.5 point favorites, I believe, entering this game here. One last thing before we wrap it up for the All Things Mizzou podcast from Mizzou on SI. The key to this game, and I'm going to go with what I mentioned last week too, of getting a fast start, just because we saw against Boston College, Mizzou did not get a fast start, and they were really close before Travis Johnson's interception, very close to being on the wrong side of this game, and it flipping quickly in Boston College's favor. I mean, Boston College could have went on to a 21-3 lead pretty easily there before Johnson's interception, and it's been a struggle for this team all 3 weeks, really. Besides, well, I wouldn't include Murray State in that, but the past 2 weeks at least, they have that scoreless first quarter against Buffalo, scoreless again against Boston College in the first quarter on offense, especially, and some of that is penalties. And some of it is the third down execution. Again, Drinkwitz mentioned it right after the first week that the passing offense was not where it needed to be on third downs. And we saw it come up early on against Boston College, where Brady Cook missed 2 receivers on 2 straight third downs. So they're going to have to get to a fast start. Like I said last week with Castellanos, if you do not want a mobile quarterback to be in the game. You want him playing from behind, so that they have to be a little bit more conservative, have to be smarter with the ball, and can't be risking stuff as much to kind of get creative with it. Michael, any keys to the game step out to you for this?
Yeah, mine's just it's not going to be anything new from what I've said this episode. I really want the Tigers to go and shut down the pass game, both by pressuring Diego Pavia. I really want to see more off the edge from Johnny Walker and Zion Young. They have great pass rush moves, but maybe get something to show for it. And obviously the guys in the middle with McClellan and Christian Williams, you could argue that Chris McClellan has been technically one of the best players in this defense so far. So to get to see maybe some of their fruits of their labor and go hit the quarterback a couple times. But primarily, Vanderbilt does not have the biggest passing threats in the world. Again, Stowers is a solid tight end, but they're gonna face harder. So go lock down the pass. Don't let Diego Pavia throw the ball around and get what he wants. Don't let no deep balls. Physical with no penalties. The secondary penalties hasn't been much of an issue to my knowledge. There might have been one pass interference last week, but I can't remember for sure. but
Yeah, there was one
no,
on Pride
yeah, there
on third
was.
down, but that
Yes,
was a
okay, that's what I
questionable
thought.
call.
Yes, but no major defensive penalties or in the secondary, and don't let Diego Pavia get the ball to his receivers easily. Tighten things up in zone coverage, and that would really be my key. Kind of a common sense thing. If they can't throw the ball, then they're not going to be able to score, and therefore one team's going to win. So. Obviously, a little bit of common sense there, but yeah, making sure they can shut down the pass, and that goes hand in hand with not letting Diego Pavia, do kind of what we've been talking about and go run all over the place.
All right, that's going to do it for us on the All Things Mizzou podcast here on Missouri on SI. I'm Joey Van Zummeren. He's Michael Stamps. We appreciate you tuning into this episode, and be sure to check out the rest of our coverage over on Mizzou SI for Vanderbilt week and for the rest of this Mizzou season.